Hey guys, welcome back to more malicious compliance stories. In this video, I spent 20 years building my dad's $5 million company. When he died, he left it all to my inexperienced sister, who immediately fired me. This was a big mistake because what I did next destroyed everything my golden child sister inherited. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled, "After 20 years of building my dad's $5 million company, my golden child sister becomes CEO and fires me." So my dad was the hardest blue-collar worker I knew. He worked as a construction worker for a long time, getting up at 7 AM and staying at work until 5, sometimes even later, also that we could live a good, comfortable life. When I was around 8, he began talking about making his own construction company. He was always ambitious and talked about wanting to be more entrepreneurial, but I honestly didn't think he was gonna start his own company. To be fair, at that age, I probably didn't think a lot about that stuff. It took my family by surprise since he was doing well enough in his normal construction job, and my mom was not really supportive of the idea since my dad was already working long hours and trying to form a construction company would take up more time and money, but he insisted that it would be good for the family in the end. My dad formed the company by himself, getting all the necessary documentation, dealing with the legal proceedings, and setting up the corporate structure with proper business succession planning in place. I saw how much it wore him out, but he was always persistent, getting the company afloat. Around this time, when I was young, I started hanging around the office after school while my mom was at work. I was not doing any real work, just helping organize papers, filing simple documents, and watching how my dad ran things. As I got older, I started helping with basic office tasks during summers and weekends, nothing that violated any labor laws, just family helping family. Well, later, my dad formally hired me part-time. I started with simple filing and data entry, gradually learning more complex administrative tasks. When I was in my senior year, I took on more significant responsibilities like scheduling interviews, managing correspondence, and helping with basic bookkeeping. The progression was gradual. Each year I learned more about the business and took on age-appropriate responsibilities. It was honestly such a heavy-handed job, even though I was not literally doing any of the heavy lifting. Throughout high school, I had to work almost every day, so at times I would miss out on hanging out with friends and had to quit some of my extracurriculars because the work became too much to handle. But if I could go back, I think I would do it all over again. Working at my dad's company really gave me skills that I utilize a lot now in the real world, and it really got me to think like an adult early on. It also made me realize what I wanted to dedicate my career to. You know how they tell you that high school is where you learn what you want to do with your life? Yeah, for most of high school I was really confused about what I wanted to do. I had some friends who came into high school knowing exactly what they wanted, others who drifted around until the end, finally then deciding on a major. I dipped my hand into everything, sports, theater, a bunch of different clubs, but nothing really clicked except the work at my dad's company. When college applications came around, I decided to major in business management. I knew the degree would help improve my skills and would aid in managing my dad's company, which by then was generating several millions in annual revenue. Plus, I'd be able to get hired at other companies considering I had a lot of experience under my belt along with a degree. While in college, I balanced my administrative work with my schoolwork. The company continued to grow throughout my college years, and by the time I graduated, it had become quite successful. My dad often mentioned we were approaching a $5 million company valuation, and to help balance everything, my dad brought in additional staff so that some of the work I had to do would be distributed among others. With more employees, my workload became more manageable, and I was actually able to have a college experience. After I graduated college, I worked even harder while also settling down with my girlfriend, now wife of course, and at this point I'd been with the company for over 15 years and had taken on more senior administrative responsibilities. While I was still managing some of the bigger operational tasks, we now had enough staff that the day-to-day work was distributed among others. I also began managing operations at another company part-time to broaden my experience. I was overall very satisfied with where I was in life and was extremely happy. With that all out of the way though, let me get into the meat of what happened. During the later years of the pandemic, think 2021 bordering on 2022, my dad caught COVID. He survived it, but it weakened him really badly. He was hospitalized in the middle of the night because he was struggling to breathe. Although he fought hard in the hospital for weeks, he eventually passed away due to complications. By this time, I'd been working with him for nearly 20 years, building what had become a $5 million construction company. My family, of course, was in shambles, but so was the company. A lot of the senior management was close with my father, so they were really saddened by his death. There was also the worry of who was going to take over the company now that my dad was gone. Without someone at the head, everyone was worried the company would quickly tank. As the lead administrator and my father's closest business associate, I took control of the company in the meantime in order to keep things balanced while the legal succession process was being handled according to the business plan my father had established years earlier. A few weeks after my dad's passing, we had a meeting with the lawyers to discuss his will and the business succession plan. My mom was aware that my dad had written detailed instructions for who would inherit the company, but she was not so sure of the specifics. As this was a private family matter, we didn't invite anyone from the company, but I knew he was close with a lot of the senior managers, so I wouldn't have been surprised if he had named one of them as his successor. I was there not only for myself and my family, but also representing the operational continuity of the business. The will was read by my father's lawyer, the house would remain in my mom's possession, and once she passed, it would go to me or my sister. It was our choice. I'd already moved out by now, so I did not need the house, and his few personal items would go to me, like his car. His finances were split among the three of us, with a large portion going to my mom, of course. Finally, we got to the company. The lawyer announced that according to the business succession plan, the new CEO of the company would be my sister. I was in shock. I knew my sister was always the favorite child. She was the youngest and the girl my dad spoiled the hell out of her. Although I wasn't particularly thrilled at the favoritism, I was also very surprised that he would transfer control of his $5 million company to her. It was not like my father hated me. I think we had a decent bond, not close but decent. My sister did not have any real experience running a company. She had only worked part-time as a waitress and had since quit that job after she started dating her boyfriend, who makes a decent chunk of money. As selfish and arrogant as it may seem, I was honestly very hurt that my dad did not choose me to become CEO after 20 years of building this company alongside him. I was not necessarily expecting it, but I think the fact that he chose my sister over me or anyone from senior management was extremely shocking. It really reflected his favoritism. Still though, I was willing to give my sister the benefit of the doubt and trusted that my dad may have had a good reason for putting her in control of the company. Maybe he knew that she did not have her own source of income. Like I said, she quit her job and was relying on her boyfriend and wanted to help her. Maybe he wanted to give her a taste of the real world. I don't know. The succession documents didn't specify his reasoning, so these are all just speculations. As tolerant as I was trying to be, however, my sister was not helping. She kept rubbing it in my face, and it took a lot for me not to snap at her. A week into her running the company, I received an email from her basically saying that my services were no longer needed and that I was fired. I was in complete shock. I'd been running administrative operations for the company for 20 years, helping my dad build it from a small startup to a $5 million business, and not only did he give my sister the position, but she also fired me from it. I texted her asking her why she was firing me, and she replied, "Only one sibling should be working in the company." I was extremely angry. I know that some of you might be thinking I'd already worked at the company long enough and that it was my time to go, but I had been there since it was nothing. I had helped build it from the ground up over 2 decades, and now not only was there no recognition for my sacrifices, I was also being booted from the company as if I was someone who never mattered at all. And by the way guys, just to quickly interject here, if you would have been in the same position as OP, what would you have done? Would you have just taken it like this? Or would you have tried to get some kind of revenge or teach the entitled golden child sister a lesson? Let me know in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much. Anyway, luckily, I had my other part-time job, so I was not completely lost, but I was still very surprised and upset by what happened. As petty as it might have been, a few months after getting fired, I decided I wanted to get back at my sister. Let me preface this by saying the company was already performing horribly under my sister's direction. I checked in with former colleagues and reviewed the company's financial reports when I could, and it was clear that whatever she was doing was not helping the company one bit. I was just helping the process along. My sister may have thought she had inherited so much easy wealth, but I was gonna make sure it was taken right from her hands. First, I decided to join a competing construction company in our area. This was a newer company that had been trying to compete with my dad's, but couldn't due to how established our company had become over the years. I would help bring this company up while simultaneously documenting what was happening at my sister's company. They saw my resume and 20 years of experience and asked why I was switching over. I explained that I'd been let go by the new management. I didn't detail the reason as to why, as I didn't want to show that I was angry or trying to get revenge during an interview, but I think they understood the situation and hired me. They needed an experienced administrator anyway. As I mentioned, I continued to keep in contact with some of the senior management team. They told me all about what my sister was doing. Apparently, to save as much money as possible, she was cutting a lot of corners with heavy disregard for safety protocols. Many of the experienced managers quit as a result, and others were afraid to speak up about the dangerous practices for fear of getting fired too. I asked one of the financial managers to document everything that was happening. He gathered evidence from me like meeting notes, email screenshots, and documented safety violations showing what my sister was doing. The safety violations were becoming increasingly serious, ignoring OSHA requirements, skipping equipment inspections, and using substandard materials. Once I had enough documented evidence of the safety violations, I submitted a formal complaint to OSHA with all of the documentation. I also provided copies to the State Labor Department and relevant regulatory agencies. OSHA launched a full investigation. They found multiple serious safety violations and imposed heavy fines. The State Labor Department also got involved, and several ongoing projects were shut down for safety inspections. The regulatory scrutiny was intense, and word spread quickly through the local construction industry about these violations. With the regulatory crackdown, the company fell apart and everything my sister inherited collapsed. Many of the remaining senior staff left, not wanting to be associated with the safety violations and regulatory problems. The company's reputation was destroyed, clients canceled contracts, and the financial penalties were devastating. When the company fell, the construction company I was working for was able to step in and take over several of the abandoned projects, establishing us as a new major player in the local market. Looking back at it now, what I did was extremely calculated, but like I said, the company was heading towards disaster anyway with those safety violations. Someone was gonna get seriously hurt if those practices continued. Either way, it would have been shut down eventually. It just depended on how quickly the regulators caught up. I'm still working for the new construction company and have made it my full-time position since this company is growing rapidly. It's nice to be working full-time for a construction company again, and it makes me feel like how I did as a kid, helping my dad build something meaningful. The irony is that my 20 years of experience helped building my dad's company is now being put to good use, helping his competitor become the leading construction firm in our area. And yeah guys, that story was just amazing. I'm so glad that OP came out on top in the end. The next one is a superb malicious compliance story that is titled "Boss says the time reported by the punch system is law. Watch me use the law to my advantage." So 8 or 9 years ago, I was a baker at a popular fast food chain in my country. I always have been a model employee, so one day I was surprised that the manager asked me into her office. She reprimanded me because I'd taken a 45 minutes instead of 30-minute break one day the previous week. I remembered that day, and indeed I had taken more than 30 minutes, 31 minutes to be exact, and that was because on my way back someone had a concern that I took the time to resolve. I explained that to her, but she was adamant that the system rounded to the nearest 15 minutes and that if it said 45 minutes, then there was no way I could have only been 1 minute late. She made it clear it was my fault and that the punch system is a law since it cannot lie. On my next shift, I looked into it. On the punch system, there's a way to see at what time you punched. I realized the system was not rounding the amount of time you worked/were on break, but rather the time at which you punched. What happened that day was that I punched out at 10:22, rounding to 22 o'clock 15 minutes, and got back 31 minutes later at 10:53, rounding to 11, hence the 45-minute break. Now, in my position, I had the luxury of choosing when to go on break as long as they didn't run out of anything during that time. From that day till the day I switched jobs a few months later, I made sure to go on break just after the cutoff and back just before the next one. For instance, punching out at 10:03, rounding to 10:15, and back in at 10:52, rounding to 10:45. I thus ended up with 44 minutes break that, according to the system, were only 30 minutes long. One time, a supervisor told me that it seemed like I was gone for a bit longer than usual, and I replied that she saw me punching in and out and that she could go confirm in the system if she wanted to. I never heard from it after that. Edit: the manager was also under the impression that the system rounded the amount of break time to the nearest 15 minutes, not the ins and outs. That's also what they tell during recruitment, and hence why I initially thought that's how it worked. The supervisor who noticed was a part-timer, not the same person as the manager. I also don't think they actually cared, I just found it strange. By the way, before leaving, I did share the trick with a few coworkers, but since cashiers have a supervisor that coordinates break time, they cannot really be late. For them, 1 minute late is actually noticed by someone, let alone 14. And yeah guys, if you've ever gotten malicious compliance at your workplace, please let us know in the comments, because I love these stories. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. 8 years ago, I left behind the chaos of city life and decided to live off the grid. I sold my belongings, bought a piece of untouched wilderness, and spent years building a modest house with my own hands. The land was a mix of dense woods and open meadows with a stream flowing right through the middle. My days were filled with chopping wood, hunting, fishing, gardening, which was hard work, but it was also the most fulfilling way of living I could imagine. For all these years I was the only one in the area, the closest neighbor was miles away, and we had an unspoken agreement to keep to ourselves. That all changed when recently a developer bought up land near mine and built a suburban development called Wilderness Estates. A new homeowner association (HOA) was formed for the neighborhood, and suddenly they decided that my property, which was not part of their development or agreement, should fall under their jurisdiction. One day while I was out chopping firewood, I noticed a shiny brand new SUV making its way up my dirt road. A man in his 50s stepped out wearing an immaculate suit that looked out of place against the backdrop of the wild. He marched up to me without so much as a greeting. "Are you the owner of this property?" he barked. Yeah, I am. Who are you?" I replied, already feeling uneasy about the situation. "I'm Greg, the president of the Wilderness Estates HOA. We've been trying to contact you regarding several violations on your property," he said, looking down at me like I was some sort of pest. "Violations? I'm not part of any HOA," I stated firmly, wiping the sweat from my forehead. "That's not how it works," he snapped. "You live adjacent to our community, and that means you must comply with our regulations. And let me tell you, you're in violation of quite a few." He pulled out a clipboard and started rattling off a list. "Your house is not painted according to our community color scheme. Your lawn is overgrown and your fence is not approved. There's no paved driveway, and don't get me started on that unsightly chicken coop." I could hardly believe my ears. "Look, I'm not part of your HOA. This is my land, and I've lived here long before your little community ever existed. So you can take your rules and get off my property." Greg's eyes narrowed and he stepped closer. "We're giving you a notice to comply, or else we'll take action. You've got 30 days to make these changes, or you'll face fines and penalties." I glared at him and said, "Get off my land, now." "Fine, have it your way," he sneered before turning around and storming back to his SUV. "You will regret this." Over the next few weeks, things escalated. I started getting official-looking letters in the mail from the HOA. They contained demands and threats of fines for not adhering to their so-called community standards. I ignored every single one, but it was clear that they were not gonna let this go. A week later, I was out back checking on my chickens when I heard voices coming from the front of my house. I walked around to find a group of 4 men, including Greg, unloading construction materials from a truck parked on my property. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. Greg turned around with a smirk on his face, saying, "We are here to bring your property up to code. Consider it a favor." "Get out now, or I'm calling the police," I said, my fists clenching at my sides. Greg stepped closer, lowering his voice to a menacing whisper. "You don't seem to get it. We are the authority here. You're either with us or against us, and trust me, you don't want to be against us." Another man who I recognized from some of the HOA letters chimed in. "If you refuse to comply, we will have no choice but to seize your property and evict you." I could not believe what I was hearing. "You have no legal right to take my property," I yelled back, feeling the heat rise in my face. Greg crossed his arms and smirked. "We'll see about that." In the days that followed, the harassment ramped up. I would wake up to find notices of violation signs staked into my front yard, warning of fines if I didn't comply. HOA members began patrolling my land, taking pictures, and even trying to sneak into my house when they thought I was not home. Then came the threat of violence. One morning, I found a note taped to my door. "You think you're above the rules? Well, we'll show you what happens when you defy the HOA. Next time it won't just be letters." That was the last straw for me. I went to the sheriff's office with a note and a stack of HOA letters I had received. The sheriff, an old-timer who had known me for years, listened as I explained the situation. "Look, these HOA types can be really pushy, but they don't have any authority over your land unless you've signed a contract," the sheriff said, flipping through the paperwork. "Well, I never signed anything," I confirmed. "Then they are trespassing and harassing you. I will pay them a visit, but you might want to consult a lawyer just in case," he advised. I took his advice and contacted a lawyer specializing in property law. She was shocked by what I told her and immediately took on my case. She instructed me to document everything, the harassment, the trespassing, the threats, and a few days later I received a letter from the lawyer representing the HOA. It was a cease and desist notice demanding that I stop harassing the HOA members. I showed it to my lawyer, who just laughed. "This is amateur hour. They don't have a leg to stand on," she said. "We will send them a counter notice demanding that they stay off your property and cease their threats immediately. And also we're gonna file for a restraining order to keep them away." As my lawyer prepared the paperwork, I beefed up security around my house. I installed motion sensor cameras, reinforced my fences, and put up more no trespassing signs. I was not gonna let these people intimidate me into submission. When the restraining order was served to the HOA, they didn't take it well. Greg and his cronies showed up on my property again, this time banging on my door shouting threats. I had already called the sheriff, who arrived just as Greg was starting to get violent. They said, "You're under arrest for trespassing and making criminal threats," the sheriff said as he cuffed Greg and his accomplices. "I'm the HOA president. I have rights." Greg screamed as he was shoved into the back of the sheriff's car. "Well, not on private property you don't," the sheriff replied coldly. With Greg and his buddies taken care of, my lawyer went on the offensive. She actually filed a lawsuit for me against the HOA for harassment, trespassing, and threats of violence. During the court proceedings, the judge was not amused by the HOA's behavior. They tried to argue that they were enforcing community standards, but the judge quickly shut them down. "You have no jurisdiction over private property not bound by your association," the judge said sternly. "Your actions were not only illegal, but a blatant abuse of power." The court ruled in my favor, ordering the HOA to cease all harassment, stay off my property, and pay me damages for the emotional distress and property violations they had caused. Greg was charged with trespassing and making criminal threats, which landed him a hefty fine and probation. With the HOA put in their place, life slowly returned to normal. I reinforced the boundaries of my land with new fencing and put up even more cameras to ensure my privacy was respected. The HOA members never dared to bother me again, especially after they had to pay up for their misguided attempts to control my life. Now, some of my friends have told me that I might have gone too far by involving the sheriff and taking things to court. They argued that maybe I could have found a middle ground with the HOA, or at least talked it out before escalating things. But honestly, after everything they put me through, I couldn't just roll over and let them win. I had to stand up for myself, right? So now I'm left wondering, am I the a-hole for dealing with the HOA in this way? Should I have tried harder to find a peaceful resolution? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know whether you think OP was actually in the wrong here and might have been the a-hole or not. I'm very curious about what you have to say. A user in the comments said, "Not the a-hole, you literally gave them multiple chances to back off before you involved the sheriff. They were the ones trespassing and making threats. What were you supposed to do? Just hand over your land because they didn't like the way you lived? Standing up for your rights is not being an a-hole. It's called self-respect." Another person said, "As someone in the legal profession, I can confirm that the HOA had absolutely no right to harass you like that. Your lawyer did the right thing by countering their attempts to intimidate you. You have every right to live on your land as you see fit. Not the a-hole, not even close." Another person said, "HOAs are notorious for overstepping their boundaries. I'm in one myself, and trust me, they can be tyrannical. You're not the a-hole for defending your home. They pushed and you pushed back. That's just how it works. You did good." Another person said, "Not the a-hole, your property property or rules, it's that simple. The fact that they showed up on your land threatening you says everything about their character. You had every right to involve the sheriff and a lawyer. Glad to see you came out on top. And the last one is a petty revenge story. It is titled "Demoted Myself and Left Him Stranded." So I worked at a company a few years back and had an amazing manager. He was efficient, supportive to everyone, and all around decent. But due to him being so good, the company wanted to move him to a store to help pick that place back up. So just before he was due to leave and a new manager started, I had to have a week off due to surgery and so missed the introductions, and he seemed to have an issue with this. I came in on my day off to hand in my sick note and meet the guy, and he was cold. Extremely lazy too. We were customer facing and sometimes needed manager approval, but he would just sit there staring at the security cams at his desk and ignore the manager bell. He would find the longest jobs and make them longer. A 30-minute stock check took him one whole 8-hour shift, for example. It turns out he was also a massive perv. I could write a long list, but I'll give highlights. He would walk past deep breathing in my ears, would talk down about women, and my favorite quote from him was, when asked to do a job I shouldn't be doing, he said, "Why get a dog and bug yourself?" That's when I lost it. What he didn't realize is I had recently been promoted a week before his arrival, and it granted very little pay rise and also has 6-month probation automatically applied. So I went home, wrote out a demotion resignation letter explaining how I was stepping down from my current role and going back to my previous role of 4 years effective immediately. I was the key holder for that night alone with one other staff. As it was effective immediately, a senior member had to suddenly stay and do all my duties. Guess who? Him. He also had to rearrange the next 2 weeks' rotation and work triple the hours to fill my role. I also spoke to the regional manager that week and asked to be moved to another store, and if he refused, I would go to the police for sexual harassment. I had a long list and we had cameras, so I was moved a week later. By the way, to add, he was fired as he was caught having intercourse in the customer toilets. Also, I didn't go to the police as the police wouldn't have taken it seriously. I was already refused to be heard on an assault case. They would have left me out the station for sexual harassment cases. And yeah guys, thank you for listening. I will see you again tomorrow.